I think it's pretty safe to say that Street Fighter V has come a very, very long way, and is arguably the best it's ever been. But despite that, it doesn't really feel like it's a game you see that much love for, you know? Like, obviously a ton of people play Street Fighter V, and a lot of them are vocal about their enjoyment of the game, but I don't know. I can't remember the last time I saw someone come out and say, yeah, I genuinely love this game. I love Street Fighter V. And that's partially why I kinda wanted to throw my hat in the ring with this video, because, you know what? I genuinely love Street Fighter V. So, let's talk about it. Now, I do want to say that the point of this video is not to, like, sway people who don't like Street Fighter V into suddenly enjoying the game. There's no point in doing something like that. Fighting games are a very personal genre, and different types of players are going to gravitate towards different games and different things in those games. One of the most important things with getting into fighting games is finding your game, you know? Finding something you really connect with. And some goober on the internet telling you that a game is good probably isn't going to do that. I'm not an authority on Street Fighter V. I'm just a person who enjoys the game, and I've had a lot of fun experiences with it, but those personal experiences are like a big part of why I love the game myself, and obviously not everyone can relate to that. I'm a pretty specific type of player. I'm not stuck in bronze, but pretty much anyone who's really good at this game could completely wash me. I haven't touched ranked in about a year, I'm just hanging out in platinum, being well and truly wholly unremarkable. Street Fighter V is just a very important game to me personally, because it's the first traditional fighting game that I ever made any kind of an effort to, like, get better at. And I've loved every minute of it. Well, for the most part. Okay, it's kind of difficult to talk about Street Fighter V without addressing some of its, you know, history, to put it nicely. Now, I got into the game in Season 2, and at that point the game was on its way to becoming something pretty cool. But, obviously, we can't ignore the launch of Street Fighter V. Street Fighter V's launch was atrocious. You know this at this point, but it's not really what we're here to talk about. It was a full-price $60 game, had absolute fuck all to do, and had enough input delay to make Nintendo blush. It was a bit of a disaster, but, like, it is what it is. I know for a lot of people out there, a game fumbling the launch is just the end-all be-all. Like, nope, you had your chance, you fucked it up, I don't like your video game anymore. And again, you know, that'll vary from person to person, but it's not really my kind of thing. Even with its launch behind it, Street Fighter V still had a little bit of a bumpy road. There was that dogshit story mode that no one gave a fuck about.
You mug. Wait, listen to me.
And even in its, like, first big upgrade in Season 3, with the release of Street Fighter V Arcade Edition, I don't know, I don't think it completely stuck the landing. There was more single-player stuff, which is nice for people who care about that, but I don't know, I think a second V-Trigger wasn't as big of an addition as Capcom might have hoped. No matter which one you pick, V-Trigger isn't something you always have, so, like, it might not have had as much of an impact on the gameplay as Capcom were hoping. And there's also the fact that, on the release of Arcade Edition, the balance between the V-Triggers was pretty fucking bad for the most part. A lot of characters just picked one in every matchup, and a lot of the time, they picked the one that they already had, because the new one was just kind of fucking terrible. I mean, remember when this shit was 3 bars? What the fuck were they thinking? Also, it was kind of weird when Season 3 of Street Fighter V gave us 5 characters in a row who were all really fucking weak upon release. Like, obviously at my level that doesn't matter so much. Jesus, even saying mid-level player feels like stretching it. But it was kind of a bummer to see, you know, top players see these characters that they were excited for and consistently go, oh, they're shit. I can't play this. And then you never ended up seeing them in tournament. That was a bummer, you know? And even after that, Season 4, which ended on a phenomenal note with Champion Edition, V-Skill 2, and 2 really interesting characters in Gil and Seth, Season 4's start was a bit fucking goofy. Like, remember when we got this? And then Capcom decided to follow that up with, like, 6 months of radio silence? Yeah, that wasn't ideal. You know, that could have gone better. I gotta say though, Season 5 of Street Fighter V was absolutely phenomenal. It was incredible. And to think that it only happened because of the positive reception near the end of Season 4. Like, there's a timeline where we didn't get Season 5. Like, that's just weird to think about. Like, everything about Season 5 was so fucking good. The number one biggest thing that Season 5 gave us was communication. The people behind the game actually fucking, like, talked to us and told us what was gonna happen and described how it was gonna go down. And, like, even outside of just getting genuinely useful information, they showed us little, like, behind-the-scenes tidbits for these characters, you know? Like the motion capture for Oro Super, I remember that. That was... didn't have to show us that, but it was cute. Like, after that just dry spell in Season 4, this was so great to see. And of course, the content that we got alongside that was absolutely brilliant. Season 5 gave us V-Shift, and I know not everyone loves it, but still, it undeniably shook up the gameplay in an interesting way. And like, it's another thing to do with your V-meter. Like before that, it was literally just V-reversal or V-trigger, so I think this was a much needed addition in a way. And even after that, we got 5 new characters. And I kind of love all of them, at least to some degree. Dan was just oozing with personality, and is without a doubt my favorite iteration of the character. The integration of his taunts into gameplay is just some of the most creative stuff I've ever seen, and while he was definitely very weak upon release, some nice buffs that he got in the definitive update definitely gave him a helping hand. Rose was a very interesting take in a character that I didn't give a single fuck about ever, and I actually ended up really enjoying her. Akira was a love letter to one of Capcom's more underappreciated franchises, and while it's not a franchise I know anything about, Akira's inclusion was still really fucking cool. And man, Oro, in my opinion, the crown jewel of Street Fighter V. Oro is the coolest fucking character Capcom have made in a long ass time. He's so fucking fun. There is so much to talk about with this character, I don't even know where to begin. Like, I remember before he came out, people were worried, like, oh, I hope they don't dumb him down. Is he gonna still have his chicken combos? And Capcom were like, yeah, he's still got them. Along with like 11 new fucking flavors. Check all this shit out. I love Oro. I could gush about the character all day. Which is why I'm a Poison player. And listen, I know a lot of people don't like Luke, but personally I think he's alright. I really like the idea of ending Street Fighter V on what is essentially a Street Fighter 6 character. That's really cool to me. And I understand a lot of the gripes people have. He was kind of meant to be intentionally overpowered, which is a little silly. His design is not interesting at all, and personal gripe, his super is probably my least favorite in the entire game. What the fuck is this? But outside of that, I do kind of like Luke. I think it's an interesting way to end Street Fighter V, and at my level where character strength isn't really that much of a factor, I like his gameplay. I think it's kind of cool. I like the idea of charging moves to gain different properties. I like what he brings to the table in a way, even if I definitely understand people's complaints with him. And listen, I'm aware that up to this point I've kind of just been talking about the game's content, not really the game's actual gameplay, but it can't be stressed enough how much more interesting of a game Street Fighter V became over the years, especially in Season 4 and Season 5. The direction they took the game with the balance patches was kind of really fucking cool. They introduced a lot of really cool stuff and made a lot of pretty boring characters way more interesting. Obviously not every change was a win, some of them were just kind of unhelpful and some of them were just pretty fucking bizarre, but like, overall, Street Fighter V became just so much more interesting over the years. On top of just making the game more fun and interesting, I'd say the last couple balance patches were like just good in terms of balance as well. Like, I'm not really at the level where that matters, and I am absolutely not good enough at the game to point at balance changes and be like, yeah, those were healthy for the game probably. I'm fully aware that there is still stuff in the final version of the game that top players really don't care for, like Luke, Dhalsim. They really don't like this move. They really fucking don't like this move. But for the most part, the balance seems pretty solid, and you got to appreciate that. And listen, I'm aware of the critiques of Street Fighter V's gameplay. A lot of people do think it's kind of dumbed down or baby modified compared to other games in the series. And to that, I would have to say, Like, listen, if you enjoy the other games, that's fine, but I don't really feel a need to compare Street Fighter V's gameplay to other games in the series. I just don't really see a point, because, like, if you don't like how it compares to other games in the series, you would just play the other games in the series. Like, Street Fighter V has gameplay, and I like it. There's not much more to it than that for me. I know a lot of people point at V-Trigger and go, uh-oh, combat mechanic, stinky, but like, I don't mind it. With the game becoming more interesting over time, I think we mostly got past the issue of characters not feeling complete until they were in V-Trigger. And the introduction of V-Shift gave you another thing to think about when considering your V-meter. And also, the introduction of V-Skill 2 gave a lot more characters more ways to build V-meter. And that's kind of my biggest gripe with V-Trigger in general. I think it would have maybe been more fun if getting the shit beaten out of you built less V-meter and you had like maybe 1 or 2 more ways to build V-meter yourself. But I don't know. I still like it the way it is, and it's fine. I enjoy it for the most part. I promise me liking V-Trigger has nothing to do with the fact I love Oro so much, by the way. Absolutely zero bias there, I promise. Another mechanic I know some people don't care for is Crush Counter. Personally, I don't mind it. I like that it builds V-meter, and at higher levels of play where people know how to play around Crush Counters, I don't have any issue at all. I think it hasn't, like, hampered my enjoyment of watching the game in any way, shape, or form. However, I will say that while it's, you know, an interesting way of conveying the importance of counter hits to newer players, at lower levels of play, Crush Counters are a little trickier to play around. I remember back in my Bronze days, I was just getting hit with this shit 24/7, especially the ones that were plus on block, those were pretty tricky. However, one aspect of Crush Counters I absolutely love is their use in anti-air combos. If you anti-air with a normal and you get a Crush Counter, you can generally get some really cool combos off it. Much more than just like one normal or DP, or if you're lucky, a small little juggle. Personally, I love these not just because they're really fun to do, but because I think they're a really good example of risk versus reward. Like, obviously something like a DP would be a more consistent anti-air because, you know, it's faster, it has invul, but you generally just get the DP, maybe you cancel it to super or something like that. But with these normals, they're not as consistent because they're slow, they generally don't have invul, they're prone to losing to jump-ins, but if you're on top of your game and you pull it off, you can get some massive damage and some admittedly pretty flashy looking combos. Some of these really aren't suited to being anti-air normals at all, and unfortunately a lot of characters just don't have something like this, which is a shame, but for the characters that do have them, I absolutely adore this, and it's my favourite aspect of Crush Counters in general. However, I think the thing that most people point to when they talk about Street Fighter V being dumbed down is the input buffer, and how it affects the combo system as a whole. See, Street Fighter V sort of introduced 3 frames of input buffer at all times to Street Fighter, and that means that there's no more traditional 1-frame links. In a way, this is nice because, you know, it makes the game more consistent, more accessible, but it also sort of removes the aspect of being able to balance combos that have, you know, very high damage or that kind of thing around difficulty, which some people wouldn't care for. Obviously, there's something very cool about landing a combo that's very difficult and being rightfully rewarded for that. However, I think some people have the idea that Street Fighter V is just devoid of high execution combos and such, and that's definitely not the case, I would say. Street Fighter V has more technical characters and it has some very difficult combos, but they're just, you know, not difficult in the traditional sense. Rather than requiring something like a frame-perfect link, they require stuff like specific cancel timing, very specific spacing, a very specific micro walk, it's very specific charging, that's a big one, that kind of thing. I think the first time I had some kind of exposure to this was this old, well, it's not that old actually, this Baffael vid, where he breaks down one of Tokido's plays at EVO 2017, where Tokido does this relatively simple looking combo that, you know, most people wouldn't really think twice about, that if you actually tried to do yourself, you'd realize is actually really well thought out and is quite complex. This back heavy punch is perfectly spaced, is cancelled into red fireball at the last possible frame, and the entire combo only would have worked if the opponent was crouching, and Tokido recognized that, and as a result he got the combo. This is where Street Fighter V's combo game shines to me. In this context, where you've just sitting in training mode, there's your character, there's the opponent's character. Yeah, maybe Street Fighter V's combo game isn't the most interesting thing in the world, but when you are looking for specific things, trying to optimize damage out of specific scenarios, that is when Street Fighter V's combo game shines to me. I remember like the first time I personally experienced this was when I was messing around versus Blanca in training mode. In V-Trigger 2, Blanca can cancel any of his ball attacks into this new ball attack, and he can use it to do stuff like make his EX up ball safe. However, I remember finding out that there was a gap between when he does the EX up ball into the V-Trigger 2 ball, and I was like, oh, so he's still unsafe, but you have to hit him out of the air. I wonder what I can do with that. So I messed around with the character I was playing at the time, Balrog, and I found out that I could get this unique punish in that scenario. And then, once I'd found that, I booted up like 5 other characters that I didn't play, and I just messed around in the same scenario figuring out what they could get. Because it was fun. Like, I wasn't ever gonna land that, because, you know, I don't play the characters that I was messing around with, but it was just fun. It's fun finding out how you can optimize damage out of specific scenarios like that. And I think this is where Street Fighter V's input buffer actually shines, because it offers this sense of consistency. This might not be something that everyone can relate to, especially if you're like really good, but you ever play a fighting game that lacks traditional input buffer like Third Strike or Plus R, and you're just messing around in training mode, and you try something, and it doesn't work. And you're just there like, okay, does that actually not work? Or did I just fuck it up? Now, I can't stress this enough. This is not a jab at fighting games that don't have traditional input buffer like Plus R or Third Strike. I love those games as they are, and I wouldn't change a single thing about them. Like, learning about some of the high execution shit in those games and trying to implement it myself has been really, really fun. I've watched dozens of Urian setups that I've probably done about 4 or 5 of myself, and I had a phase in Plus R where I played Zapper, just because I got hit by Zapper's Dog Infinite, and I was like, holy shit, that's tight as fuck, I wanna do that. I never did, but still, it was pretty fun. I understand that this is not something that's exclusive to Street Fighter V, but for me personally, Street Fighter V was like the first game where I could just like find things out for myself and actually be like confident in it, you know? It was just fun to mess around in specific scenarios and find things out for myself. And another thing that I think the easier execution really helps in is that once you've actually found these like unique combos that you can get in these unique situations, because the execution is generally easier, once you recognize the situation you can land them in a real match, they're generally not hard to get. You can discover something, hop online, and then, you know, if the situation comes up, you'll probably land it, because chances are it's not super difficult. And that feels great. To me, Street Fighter V is a game of, you know, little achievements. I love finding out little things and going, wow, this is cool, I can't wait to land this in a match, and then just pretty quickly actually landing it. It feels amazing. Like in other games that I play that are a bit more difficult, I'll land something that's just like actually really important to my character, like pretty fundamentally basic, and I'll be like, oh damn, I actually landed that. And that's really sick in its own right. But it doesn't mean I didn't enjoy my time with Street Fighter V. I loved every second of it. And this also ties into something else I love about Street Fighter V. I don't know if I could confidently call Street Fighter V my favorite Street Fighter game to play, but to be completely honest, I think it's my favorite Street Fighter game to watch. I fucking love watching Street Fighter V. I know a lot of people find watching Street Fighter V pretty boring, but personally I really enjoy it, and I think a factor of that is just because of like the level I'm at with the game. Like, I'm very much just kind of okay at the game. I understand Street Fighter V, but I'm not very good at putting stuff into practice, and you know, that's why I'm in Platinum. I'm just okay at this game. But because of that, when I watch like genuinely good players play the game, I can understand why they're doing the things that they're doing, and that feels fun. It's nice knowing what's going on. I can see a top player land something that's pretty sick, and I could be like, yo, that's awesome, I want to try that, and I could actually maybe possibly potentially land it. There's something very rewarding about watching Street Fighter V. I really feel like I'm learning something.
Yeah, 2 Urians on the same team is kind of odd, but... What the fuck was that combo? I don't think I've ever seen a Urian player do that before. Hey, Fassa, is there any reason why you would do this other than style points? Oh, does that build more meter? Is that what that is? That probably builds more meter, right? With headbutt into light tackle at the end, probably builds a tiny bit more bar. Damn, he's optimal.
And of course, because the players I'm watching are actually really fucking good at the game, they have a better knowledge of Street Fighter V. They know these like specific scenarios where they can get more damage, and they know, you know, specific combos that they can land in specific scenarios. And because of that, it's really fun to learn from. There are so many situations where I'll see a top player do something, and I'll want to do it myself. And I love that. God, I fucking love seeing people who are good at this game land things that they want to land. It's really fun.
Fuck yes.
To me, it really feels like a lot of Street Fighter V's identity comes from landing the right combo at the right time, and encouraging you to experiment with what you can land in these specific scenarios. I really love that. Some of my favorite combos in this game are like really fucking simple. I love doing crouching heavy punch into V-trigger activate into raw super. The scaling is ass, but it makes me feel smarter than I actually am when I land it. One of my favorite combos I found out about recently is this V-trigger 1 Abigail combo that Brutus recently showed me. You do sweep into V-trigger 1 activate, and you can get a partially charged forward heavy punch, and it gives Abigail an ambiguous cross-up. To some people, that's just a 2-hit combo, and that's all it is. But I thought this was the coolest shit in the world when I found out about it. Because, like, it was a combo utilizing a move that I previously thought had just nothing going for it, that being his V-trigger 1 forward heavy punch, and, like, it was just a really neat little bit of tech that I had no idea existed, and it was really fun to see that put into practice. Now, of course, stuff like this is not exclusive to Street Fighter V, but like I said, fighting games are very personal. People are going to have different experiences with them, and it just so happened that I had this kind of experience with Street Fighter V. Even if this video doesn't heighten your appreciation for Street Fighter V in the slightest, maybe it'll make you appreciate some moment that you had in a fighting game you love a little bit more. And speaking of like Street Fighter V's identity, I really like how in some of the later patches, it really felt like the devs sort of leaned into it. You know what I mean? Like, buttons became more whiff punishable, encouraging you to learn how to whiff punish stuff. Buttons got larger cancel windows, encouraging you to do single hit confirms. And God, can I just gush for a minute about how they handled the Dan Infinite? Like, okay, the Danfinite was something that maybe some developers would look at and be like, uh-oh, we gotta get that the fuck out of here. That's a problem. But instead of removing it entirely, they gave Dan the RNG red fireball, so that 15% of the time his fireball would randomly be buffed to launch the opponent. So it's an objective buff in every single context except the infinite. And because they made the infinite weaker, they made it better. Because after that, they allowed you to set up the infinite with V-Skill 1 as well as V-Skill 2. And like, I loved that. And on top of that, the red fireball was also just cool because it tied really well into Dan's personality. Whenever he got the red fireball, like that 15% chance, he would act shocked. He's like, whoa, what the fuck, I just threw that? And that ties into like this concept of Dan being more powerful than he actually realizes. It's just, the red fireball is the single coolest nerf of all time. I love it. It's so fucking good. It's so fucking good. Thank you, Capcom. Thank you for that. As I said earlier, I'm not making this to like sway people on Street Fighter V, but maybe if you already loved the game, maybe now you feel a bit more comfortable talking about why you love it. And maybe if it's just sitting there installed on whatever you play on, I don't know, maybe give it another shot. I don't think the game is perfect, not by any means. I do have my issues with it. The netcode is fine. It is rollback, so it's not the worst thing in the world. When it works, but it's not exactly ideal. I don't really know how it works, but when it goes wrong, you really feel it. I guess that's what I'm getting at. I think overall the game looks good visually, but I think some aspects of it haven't aged so well. The newer characters tend to look fantastic, but some of the older ones look a little bit rough around the edges. And also, I don't know what the fuck was going on around Season 3. There's some goofy-ass animations in this game. Especially Sakura. I don't know what the fuck happened with Sakura in this game. Anyone out there who, like, knows things about animation, I'm sure they could describe what's up here, because she does not animate well in this game at all. Something is off. While I love the game mechanically for the most part, the one thing that I'm not really sure how I feel about is stun. I don't hate stun, but I don't know. It might just be because I'm not that good and I get stunned a lot, but I don't know. I'd maybe prefer the game if stun wasn't there. I can't tell. I'd have to think about it. And lastly, my #1 biggest issue with Street Fighter V is casual match. Ranked I get. But why the fuck is casual match a forced best of 3? Especially in a game where it takes so fucking long to get into another game.
Today, Junior?
If I play someone who I am having fun playing with in a no-stakes match, can I not just keep playing them? Is that too much to ask? Right? Like, a big part of why I love fighting games is that sensation of playing someone for an extended period of time and, like, learning how they play and adapting to it. Can't do that. Can't do that if there's probably like 2 or 3 games. Nope, I just get told to fuck off, I have to wait for 2 full minutes, and then I'm being forced to play against an Ed, whose fucking base PS4 is slow cooking under the Italian sun. Like, God. But yeah, despite all that, I really genuinely do love this game. Please let me know if you also feel the same way I do, or, you know, just like Street Fighter V for different reasons. I'm curious what other people think. Or even if you have a fighting game that you really like that you feel doesn't get enough love. Just any example of something like that, I'd love to hear. Either way, I hope you enjoyed this. This was a lot of fun to talk about. I've wanted to talk about it for a long time, but I didn't really know how. So, yeah, I hope you enjoyed.